The core world of Ethelgard did not merely sit in space, it presided over it. From the vantage point of a high-orbit approach, the capital city was a sprawling, luminous testament to 10,000 years of imperial dominance. It was a colossal orbital ring, a halo of silver and adamant forged around the equator of a gas giant that shimmered with violet storms. The city itself was crowned by the Palace of the Ascendant, a structure that defied conventional architecture. It had not been built so much as grown, a majestic organism of crystalline biometal that pulsed with a slow, rhythmic heartbeat of pure energy. Its spires twisted upward like calcified lightning, piercing the thin membrane of the atmosphere to drink directly from the stellar winds. Around the ring, the void was cluttered with the choreography of empire. Thousands of heavy freighters moved in sluggish rivers of ion trails, hauling ore from the fringe colonies to feed the insatiable industry of the capital. Neon trade rings flickered with holographic advertisements the size of continents, selling everything from gene mods to luxury nebulas. And hovering beyond them, silent and predatory, were the knife-shaped silhouettes of the Imperial war fleet. They sat parked against the velvet black of space, their weapon ports dark but unblinking, a reminder that the peace of the Empire was maintained at the barrel of a singularity cannon. Deep within the biometal chest of the palace, Empress Shalira sat upon the obsidian throne. She was a figure carved from ice and starlight. Her posture was rigid, the product of a century of discipline. Her spine fused with the neural interface of the chair that allowed her to monitor the pulse of her dominion. A shimmering crown of neural filaments floated just inches above her white hair, twitching like the antennae of an insect as it fed her streams of data from the council below. Her skin was pale violet, common among the highborn, but her eyes were pools of absolute black, void of mercy. She looked down at the Council of 12, her gaze cold and calculating. They were debating trade tariffs with the outer rim, but Jalira heard the subtext beneath their droning voices. She heard ambition. She heard treachery. She trusted none of them. Not the High Priestess, whose robes rustled with the sound of dry leaves. Not Lord Varkesh, whose smile was too sharp and whose eyes lingered too long on the empty seat beside her, the seat reserved for a husband she did not have. "Enough," Shalira said, her voice amplified by the acoustics of the throne room so that it resonated in the chest of every noble present. Her tone was not loud, but it carried the weight of a collapsing star. "We will not starve the outer colonies to line the pockets of the trade guilds. The tariffs remain at 5%. If the guilds disapprove, remind them that their charters are revocable." She waved a hand, a gesture of dismissal that sent a ripple of tension through the room. She was the absolute ruler of 1,000,000,000 souls. Yet she sat alone, encased in power, watching the shadows for the knife she knew was coming. 3 sectors away, in the Hall of Whispering Glass, Princess Nira stood by a transparent wall that looked out over the dizzying drop of the orbital ring. She was the jewel of the Empire, groomed from birth to be perfect. Her skin was a softer shade of violet than her mother's, luminous and unmarked save for the bioluminescent tattoos that traced elegant, swirling patterns across her high cheekbones and down the column of her neck. They were not ink, but reactive pigment, currently. They pulsed a slow, calm blue, masking the turbulence beneath her ribs. Her eyes were her most striking feature, shifting like nebulae, swirling with colors that betrayed her mood to anyone who knew how to look. Right now, they were gray, the color of boredom. Another diplomat, a bloated representative from the aquatic worlds, was blathering on about the exquisite quality of his planet's kelp harvest. Nira nodded at the appropriate intervals, her face a mask of polite interest, while her mind was light years away. She watched a small, battered scout ship detach from a docking arm in the distance and burn hard for the open sky. "Take me with you," she thought, the ache in her chest sudden and sharp. She felt the weight of the eyes upon her, her attendants, the royal guard, the sensors embedded in the walls. She was the most protected prisoner in the galaxy. Every conversation was logged, every movement analyzed. Her life was a series of arranged movements leading toward an arranged marriage to a man she had likely never met. A political transaction to secure a fleet or a trade route. "Princess," the diplomat gurgled, pausing for breath. "I hope the kelp samples meet with your approval." Nira turned her gaze back to him, her eyes flashing a brief, polite gold. "I am certain they will be delicious. Ambassador, my mother will be pleased," and it was the answer required of her. It was the answer she always gave. But as she turned back to the window, her hand rested against the cold glass, and for a fleeting second, the bioluminescence on her neck flared a rebellious burning orange. 200 levels down, in the sweaty, vibrating guts of the station, Kai Arden wiped a smear of hydraulic fluid from his forehead and cursed the Empire, the palace, and the specific ancestors of the architect who designed the thermal exhaust manifold. "Great engineering," he muttered, his voice echoing in the narrow maintenance shaft. "Let us put the heat exchange unit behind a wall of solid durasteel, because nobody will ever need to fix it." Genius, pure genius. Kai was human, which in the hierarchy of the Empire placed him somewhere between a domesticated pet and a sentient piece of furniture. He was 26 years old, with messy dark hair that defied regulation cuts and eyes the color of earth soil, brown and unimpressive to the alien elite, but warm and sharp. He wore the gray jumpsuit of the maintenance corps, stained with grease and smelling of ozone. He was clever. Far too clever for his rank, a fact that he worked very hard to hide. Humans who showed too much ambition tended to disappear into the penal legions on the mining moons. Kai preferred to keep his head down, do his job, and save his credits for a ticket back to the dusty colony world he came from. He braced his boots against the magnetic plating and wrenched a rusted bolt loose. Sparks showered down, bouncing off his protective goggles. "Arden," a voice crackled in his earpiece. It was the shift supervisor, a reptilian creature who enjoyed shouting. "I am here," Kai said, fighting the urge to sigh. "What is it now?" "Priority ticket. Gravity stabilizers are fluctuating on level 10, near the Royal Promenade. Get up there and recalibrate the field emitters." Level 10. The noble sector. Kai grimaced. He hated going up station. The air was too perfumed, the lights were too bright, and the way the highborn looked at him, like he was a stain on their pristine floor, made his teeth ache. "Can you send Jarrell?" Kai asked. "I am elbow deep in the thermal vent." "Jarrell is incompetent. You are the best field tech we have. Unfortunately for me, move it. Human. The Empress is holding court nearby, and if the gravity fails while she is walking, I will feed you to the waste recyclers personally." Kai snapped the wrench back onto his belt. "Understood. On my way." He navigated the labyrinth of service lifts, rising from the industrial grime of the lower decks into the crystalline opulence of the upper levels. When the lift doors opened on level 10, the air changed. It smelled of ozone and rare flowers. The walls here were not metal but semi-organic glass, pulsing with soft amber light. Kai kept his head down, tool bag slung over his shoulder, moving quickly along the edge of the corridor. He tried to be invisible. He was just a mechanic, just a human. He reached the section of the wall where the diagnostic panel was located. It was right next to a wide, ceremonial gallery, a breathtaking open space with a floor-to-ceiling view of the stars. separated from the vacuum only by a containment field of hard light energy. Kai popped the panel open and jacked in his datapad. His brow furrowed. The readings were wrong. The gravity stabilizers were not just fluctuating, they were vibrating in a feedback loop. "This is not wear and tear," he whispered to himself, his fingers flying across the holographic interface. "This is an injection code. Someone is overcharging the emitters." He felt a sudden cold prickle on the back of his neck. This was sabotage. Before he could pull the emergency shutoff, the air in the corridor buckled. A low thrumming sound, like a plucked bass string, vibrated through the floor plates. Kai looked up. At the far end of the gallery, a procession was moving, alien dignitaries in flowing robes, and at the center, walking with a mixture of grace and weariness, was the princess, Nira. She was less than 50 feet away when the feedback loop hit critical mass. The explosion did not sound like a bang. It sounded like the universe cracking open. A shockwave of distorted gravity slammed into the corridor, shattering the crystalline pillars and blowing out the hard light containment wall. The roar of escaping atmosphere was deafening, a scream of air rushing into the void. Kai was thrown backward, his magnetic boots the only thing keeping him attached to the floor. Debris, shards of crystal, metal plates, decorative statues flew past him like shrapnel. Through the chaos, he saw her. Princess Nira had been standing near the edge of the gallery. The gravity failure had neutralized the artificial plating beneath her. She was floating, helpless, her robes whipping violently around her as the suction of the vacuum dragged her toward the jagged hole in the hull. She scrambled for a handhold, her fingers scrabbling against the smooth floor. But there was nothing to grab. She was sliding, fast. Kai did not think. He did not consider his rank, or her station, or the fact that touching a member of the royal family was punishable by death. He saw a person about to die. He slammed his hand onto his belt, activating the winch on his utility harness. He hooked the carabiner to a sturdy structural strut on the wall and kicked off. The physics of the moment seemed to slow down into a cinematic crawl. Kai launched himself into the hurricane of escaping air, diving not away from the danger, but directly into it. He flew past a tumbling statue, his arms outstretched. Nira was already across the threshold, her body passing into the cold silence of the void. Her eyes were wide, filled with a terrifying realization of the end. Kai hit the end of his cable. The harness dug into his ribs, knocking the wind out of him. But his momentum swung him in a wide arc. He reached out, his hand closing around Nira's wrist just as she slipped entirely into the dark. "Got you!" he roared, though the sound was swallowed by the wind. The cable snapped taut, vibrating with the strain. Kai gritted his teeth, the muscles in his arm screaming as he halted their combined mass against the pull of the vacuum. He swung them back, using the recoil to slam them both against the bulkhead inside the shattered gallery. He hit the wall hard, his shoulder taking the impact to shield her. They collapsed to the deck, tangled in his cable and her silk robes. The emergency bulkhead slammed down a second later, sealing the breach. The howling wind cut off instantly, replaced by the hissing of life support systems flooding the area with oxygen. Silence returned, heavy and ringing. Kai lay on his back, gasping for air, his chest heaving. Nira was sprawled on top of him, shivering violently. Her luminous tattoos were flashing erratically, stark white, jagged red, panicked yellow. "Are you?" Kai wheezed, trying to sit up. "Are you hurt?" Nira lifted her head. Her eyes were wide, the pupils blown, shifting rapidly between colors. She looked at him. Really looked at him. For the first time. She saw the grime on his face, the blood trickling from a cut above his eyebrow, the terrifyingly human fragility of him. And then she felt it. Her empathic senses, usually dampened by mental training, were blown wide open by the trauma. She felt a wave of raw emotion crash into her mind, originating from him. It was not ambition. It was not sycophancy. It was pure, distilled terror, but not for himself. She tasted his fear for her. She felt the instinctive, razor-sharp decision he had made in a split second. Save her. Worry about the rest later. It hit her like a physical blow. A psychic echo formed between them, a hum in the air that made the hair on her arms stand up. "You," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You jumped. I am an idiot," Kai groaned, clutching his shoulder, "and a professional idiot." Before she could respond, the blast doors at the end of the gallery hissed open. "Freeze. Down on the ground. Now." A squad of palace guards stormed in, their armor gleaming, pulse rifles raised and charged. They saw the debris, the shattered wall, and the human mechanic entangled with the princess. To them, it did not look like a rescue. It looked like an assault. "Get away from her!" the captain screamed. 2 guards rushed forward, seizing Kai by the arms and hauling him off Naira. They threw him to the deck, pressing the muzzle of a rifle to the base of his skull. "Do not move, filth," the guard snarled. "Wait," Naira cried, scrambling to her feet. She was disheveled, her ceremonial robes torn, her hair wild. "Stop. He saved me." "Silence. Princess," the captain barked, though his voice wavered slightly. "We have secured the assailant. He blew the wall. We saw him at the panel." "I was fixing the panel," Kai yelled into the floor, his face pressed against the cold tile. "It was a sabotage loop. I was trying to stop it." "Lies," the guard said, kicking him in the ribs. Kai coughed, curling instinctively. "Stop it," Naira screamed, her voice cracking with a ferocity that stunned the room. Her tattoos flared a blinding, furious crimson. "I command you to stop." The guards hesitated. In that moment of silence, the air pressure in the room seemed to drop. A shadow fell over the entrance. Empress Shalira swept into the gallery. She did not run. She flowed, a terrifying glacier of rage and concern. Her neural crown was blazing with light, and the air around her crackled with static. She took in the scene in a single, sweeping glance, the wreckage, the guards, her daughter disheveled and shaking, and the human bleeding on the floor. "Naira," she said, her voice tight. "Are you unharmed?" Naira rushed to her mother, but she did not embrace her. She pointed a trembling hand at Kai. "Mother, tell them to stand down. That man saved my life. The wall blew out. I was falling. He caught me." Shalira's black eyes shifted to Kai. She looked at him with the clinical detachment one might view a virus under a microscope. "A human," she said, the word dripping with disdain. "A human mechanic saved the heir to the throne." "He did," Naira insisted, her chest heaving. "He risked his life. I felt it, mother. I felt his intent." Shalira stiffened. She saw the way Naira was looking at the human, not with gratitude, but with a fierce, protective intensity. She saw the blood on Kai's face and the way his eyes, even from the floor, met hers with a spark of defiance. The council members were crowding into the doorway now, whispering, their multifaceted eyes wide with scandal. Gossip was a faster-than-light particle in the court. The story was already mutating. The princess and the human, tangled on the floor. A psychic bond? Shalira felt the whispers like physical stings. She felt the precariousness of her control. Fear, old and deep, clawed at her throat. She needed to assert dominance. She needed to crush the narrative before it could form. She drew herself up to her full, terrible height. Her voice boomed, amplified by the neural crown until it shook the remaining glass in the windows. "Who is that impudent person who wants to be my daughter's lover?" she demanded. The question hung in the air. absurd and terrifying. Kai blinked, his cheek pressed against the floor. "What?" he wheezed. Naira froze, her face flushing a deep, mortified purple. "Mother, no. That is not—" Silence. Celira roared. She gestured to the guards. "Take this creature to the holding cells. If he is a saboteur, he will be executed. If he is a hero, he will be rewarded. But get him out of my sight before his presumption stains this floor any further." The guards hauled Kai to his feet. He looked at Nira, his expression a mix of shock and utter confusion. "I did not," he stammered. Nira met his gaze. "I know," she mouthed, her heart hammering against her ribs. As they dragged him away, the noble factions in the doorway exchanged looks. Some were amused, hiding smirks behind silk fans. Others looked disgusted, but all of them were typing rapidly on their data pads. By the time the blast doors closed, the phrase "impudent human lover" was already trending on the Empire's hollow feeds. Later, in the private sanctum of the Empress's quarters, the air was thick with tension. Nira paced the floor, her tattoos still swirling with agitated orange and red light. Celira sat by the window, staring out at the armada, her back to her daughter. "You humiliated him," Nira said, her voice shaking. "And you humiliated me. He is an engineer, Mother. He was doing his job. He is a human," Celira said coldly, not turning around. "And you are the princess. Do not think I missed the way you defended him. Do not think I missed the psychic resonance in the room. Naira, you bonded with him. It was an accident." Naira snapped. "It was adrenaline. And even if it was a bond, so what? He saved me when your precious guards were standing around watching." "He is a suspect," Celira countered, turning finally. Her face was a mask of stone. The explosion originated from the panel he was accessing. "He found the bomb," Nira argued. "He did not plant it. If he wanted to kill me, he could have just let me fall. Or perhaps he orchestrated the danger to play the hero." A voice oiled with malice spoke from the shadows. Lord Varkesh stepped out from behind a tapestry. He was tall, thin, and pale, with fingers that seemed to have too many joints. Beside him stood the High Priestess, her face obscured by a veil of silver chain. "Varkesh," Nira spat. "I might have known you would be pouring poison in her ear. I merely offer perspective." "Highness," Varkesh said, bowing low, "the humans are restless. There are rumors of underground cells, saboteurs who wish to destabilize the throne. This mechanic, his timing was convenient. Was it not?" "It is absurd," Naira said. "Is it?" the High Priestess whispered, her voice like grinding stones. "The throne feels a disturbance, a fracture in the order of things. This human is a variable we cannot account for." "Kill him," Varkesh suggested lightly, "just to be safe." "No," Naira shouted. "If you execute an innocent man who saved my life, you prove every critic of this empire right. You prove we are monsters." Celira looked at her daughter. She saw the fire in Naira's eyes, a fire she had not seen in years. It terrified her. It reminded her of a time decades ago when she had looked at a human with similar defiance. She pushed the memory down, locking it in a mental vault. "We will not execute him," Celira said slowly. "Not yet." Varkesh frowned. "Majesty, but we cannot ignore the possibility of treason," Celira continued. "And we certainly cannot ignore the public perception of this affair." She walked over to Naira, placing a cold hand on her daughter's shoulder. "You are scheduled to inspect the mining relays in Sector 7 tomorrow," Celira said. "It is a border system, rough, dangerous. I know the itinerary," Nira said stiffly. "The human will go with you," Celira decreed. Naira blinked. What? We will call it a reward, a promotion. He will serve as your technical liaison for the inspection. Majesty. Surely this is unwise, Varkesh interjected, though his eyes narrowed with calculation. It is a test, Shalira said, looking directly at Neera. If he is a loyal subject, he will serve you well. If he is a conspirator, he will try to contact his handlers or sabotage the mission when he thinks he is away from the palace surveillance. And if he is innocent, Neera asked quietly, then he survives. Shalira said, Varkesh, arrange it. The human Kai Arden is now assigned to the royal corvette Aegis. As Varkesh bowed and retreated, a small, cruel smile played on his lips. A border mission. Far from the capital, far from help. It was the perfect place for an accident. That night, the air on the palace's observation balcony was thin and cold. Kai stood by the railing, wearing a fresh uniform that was slightly too large for him. The stiffness of the fabric scratched his neck. He was looking out at the city, at the endless river of lights, feeling entirely out of his depth. He heard the soft chime of jewelry behind him. He turned to see Neera stepping out of the shadows. She had changed into more practical attire, a fitted flight suit of dark blue silk. Though she still wore the heavy silver cuffs of her station, her tattoos were a soft, hesitant pink. Princess, Kai said, starting to kneel. Don't, she said quickly. Please. Not after today. Kai straightened up, rubbing the back of his neck. Right. Sorry. I am just trying to not get executed. Neera moved to the railing beside him. She did not look at him, keeping her gaze on the horizon. I wanted to thank you. Properly. Before the madness starts tomorrow. You don't have to thank me for not letting you die, Kai said, a hint of his usual sarcasm creeping back in. It is generally considered common courtesy. Neera laughed, a short, musical sound that seemed to surprise her. Most people would have calculated the risk and stayed on the floor. You didn't? I am not good at math, Kai muttered. They stood in silence for a moment. It was awkward, heavy with the memory of the physical contact in the vacuum, the tangled limbs, the psychic shock. So, Kai said, clearing his throat, the Empress. That was quite a line she had. Neera groaned, burying her face in her hands. Impudent person. I am so sorry that she has a flair for the dramatic. It is trending, Kai said, pulling out his datapad. Look, someone made a remix of her shouting it. It has 5 billion views. Neera peered at the screen and giggled. It was a nervous sound, but genuine. I can never show my face in the council again. They think I have a harem of mechanics hidden in my closet. Kai looked at her, in the soft light of the planet below. She didn't look like a mysterious alien princess. She looked like a young woman who was tired of being a statue. He felt a pull in his chest, a dangerous, stupid gravity. He should step back. He should keep it professional. Instead, he leaned a little closer. Well, he said, if we are going to be stuck on a ship together for a week, we might as well make it interesting. I promise to be as impudent as possible. Neera turned her head. Her eyes met his, swirling with deep violets and golds. The heat in her cheeks flared brighter. Just keep the ship flying, Arden, she whispered, and try not to get us killed. I will do my best. Highness. An hour later, the royal corvette Aegis blasted out of the docking bay. Its engines flared blue-white, cutting a streak through the darkness as it accelerated away from the capital. On the bridge, Neera watched the palace shrink in the viewport. She saw the glimmering spire where her mother sat, alone and afraid. She touched the glass, feeling the vibration of the engines, a feeling of freedom she had not expected. In the engineering bay, Kai monitored the fusion drive. He watched the readouts, his mind racing. He knew this mission was a trap. He knew Varkesh wanted him dead. He knew the Empress was using him as bait. But as he looked at the comms monitor, which showed the bridge feed, his eyes lingered on the back of Naira's head. He remembered the feeling of her mind touching his, the terror, and the sudden, overwhelming sense of being seen. He tightened his grip on the console. Let them come, he thought. Let them try. The Aegis banked hard, punched a hole in reality and vanished into hyperspace, leaving the capital and its conspiracies far behind. The Royal Corvette Aegis was a masterpiece of imperial engineering. A sleek dagger of white ceramic and flowing glass that cut through the sub-ether like a needle through silk. On the upper decks, the air smelled of synthetic jasmine and ozone. The corridors were wide, lined with statues of past conquerors, and the gravity was calibrated to a luxurious, gentle hold that made every movement feel graceful. Princess Neera sat in her stateroom, surrounded by data scrolls regarding the mining unrest on Kalos 4. She wore a robe of woven starlight, sipping nectar from a crystal flute, but her foot tapped a nervous on staccato rhythm against the floor. 20 decks down, the reality was different. The engineering section did not smell of jasmine. It smelled of recycled air, hot metal, and the copper tang of contained fusion. The gravity here was harsh and utilitarian, designed to keep boots on the deck during high G maneuvers. Kai Arden sat in a cramped auxiliary monitoring station, his knees knocking against the console. He was not a guest here. He was an unwanted variable. The ship's crew, mostly high-caste aliens with elongated limbs and multifaceted eyes, gave him a wide berth. When they did speak to him, it was with the clipped, polite disdain one reserved for a trained animal that might bite. The royal guard stationed outside his door did not speak at all. They just watched his hands, their fingers hovering near the triggers of their pulse rifles. Kai rubbed his eyes. He had been staring at the engine diagnostics for 6 hours. He knew why he was here. The official orders said he was a technical advisor for the inspection of the strategic relay station. The unofficial truth was obvious. He was a scapegoat. If the negotiations failed, if the equipment broke, or if the princess stubbed her toe, it would be the human's fault. The door to his cramped station hissed open. Kai spun around, expecting the shift commander coming to yell about power distribution again. Instead, he saw Neera. She looked absurdly out of place in the industrial gloom, like a diamond dropped in a coal chute. She had shed the ceremonial robes for a fitted jumpsuit, though the fabric still shimmered with an expensive sheen. "Highness," Kai said, scrambling to his feet and nearly hitting his head on an overhead conduit. "You should not be down here. The radiation shielding is thin." "I am inspecting the ship," Neera said, her voice sounding a little too loud in the hum of the engine room. "Ensuring peak efficiency." Kai looked at the 2 terrified guards standing behind her in the corridor. He looked back at her. "You are bored?" "I am incredibly bored," Naira admitted, stepping inside and hitting the door lock to shut the guards out. "If I have to read one more report about mineral extraction yields, I am going to open an airlock and walk home." Kai let out a short laugh, then checked himself, remembering who she was. He sat back down. "Well, welcome to the dungeon. We have grease, noise, and 0 jasmine tea." Naira walked around the small room, her fingers trailing over the dirty metal of the manifolds. Her bioluminescent markings were a soft, inquisitive blue. "Why does it feel so different down here?" she asked. "Up there, everything is silent. Here, the ship feels alive." "It is alive," Kai said. "It is a fusion drive. It breathes. It gets hot. It gets temperamental. Speaking of which, he pointed to a coolant valve near her head that was hissing rhythmically. That secondary bypass is trying to stick. I have been meaning to hit it with a wrench, but I am not allowed to leave this chair without an armed escort. Nira looked at the valve. I can fix it. Kai raised an eyebrow. I am certified in theoretical astromechanics, Nira said defensively. She grabbed a hydrospanner from the rack. Which way do I turn it? Clockwise, Kai said, watching her with amusement. But be careful. The pressure is... Nira wrenched the valve hard. There was a wet thwack, and a jet of neon blue coolant sprayed out sideways, missing Nira's face by an inch but dousing the wall and splashing onto Kai's chest. Whoa, Kai yelled, jumping up. Nira yelped, dropping the spanner. She tried to cover the leak with her hands, which only made the spray fan out like a garden hose, drenching her jumpsuit. Let go. Let go. Kai laughed, moving in. He reached past her, his arms bracketing her body as he grabbed the manual override wheel. He cranked it hard to the right. The hissing stopped. The spray died down to a trickle. Then silence. They stood there for a moment. Frozen. They were soaked in glowing blue fluid. Kai's chest was heaving with the exertion, and Nira was pressed back against the conduit, her eyes wide. Kai realized his hands were still resting on the wall on either side of her head, trapping her in the circle of his arms. Her face was inches from his. He could smell the ozone on her skin, beneath the chemical tang of the coolant. He could see the individual flecks of gold in her nebula eyes. Nice reflex, Kai whispered, for a theoretical mechanic. Nira did not pull away. She looked up at him, water dripping from her eyelashes. Her empathic senses, usually guarded, reached out and brushed against his mind. She expected to find mockery or ambition. Instead, she found a warm, solid humor. She felt his heartbeat, steady and strong, syncing with the humming of the drive core. You are covered in sludge, she whispered, a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. So are you, Highness. Kai grinned. It is a good look, very avant-garde. They both burst out laughing. It was a genuine, unpolished sound that cut through the tension of the mission. For a second, the guards outside, the Empress, and the conspiracy did not exist. There was just a boy and a girl in a dirty room, laughing at their own mess. Kai stepped back, breaking the proximity, though his hands lingered in the air for a second before dropping. He grabbed a rag and handed it to her. So, he said, wiping the blue slime from his neck, tell me something real, not the official biography. What is the first thing you remember that was not a lesson or a ceremony? Nira wiped her face, smearing the bioluminescence of her tattoos so they glowed through the coolant. The skylight, she said softly. When I was 7, I found a vent in the east wing that led to the roof. I used to crawl up there and watch the smugglers dock at the lower rings. They looked so free, dirty, dangerous, but free. I wanted to go with them. Kai leaned against the console. I grew up on a colony called Jericho 3, Red Dust, 2 sons. We did not have smugglers, but we had sand racers. My brother and I built a bike out of scrap parts. We drove it until the engine melted. You have a brother? Nira asked. Had, Kai corrected, his voice tightening slightly. The localized plague took him 10 years ago. Imperial medical ships were in the sector, but they did not stop for a Class C colony. The silence returned, but it was not awkward this time. It was heavy with shared understanding. Nira looked at him, seeing the scars on his hands not as marks of low status, but as a history of survival. I am sorry, she said. Do not be, Kai said, tossing the rag into a bin. It taught me how to fix things myself, because nobody else is going to come down from the sky to do it for you. The mining world of Kalos 4 was a ball of gray rock and misery. When the Aegis landed at the primary outpost, the tension was palpable. The air was thick with sulfur and resentment. Imperial stormtroopers stood in phalanxes around the landing pad, their white armor stained with soot. Opposite them, behind energy barricades, hundreds of alien miners chanted and threw rocks. Propaganda drones floated overhead, blaring recorded messages. Do not listen to human agitators. The equipment failures are sabotage. The Empire protects. Kai walked down the ramp 2 steps behind Nira. He felt the eyes of the crowd on him. To the aliens, he was a human, a symbol of the species the Empire blamed for everything. To the stormtroopers, he was a traitor in waiting. Nira walked with her head high, her face a mask of regal calm, but Kai saw her hands trembling slightly at her sides. They were ushered into the command center of the strategic relay station, a massive spire of metal that controlled the defensive grid for the entire sector. The station commander, a nervous insectoid named Xylus, skittered forward to greet them. Princess, Xylus clicked. We are honored. And the advisor. Show us the core, Nira commanded, cutting through the pleasantries. You claim the defensive grid is failing due to human-coded viruses. I have brought a human expert to verify that. Xylus's antennae twitched nervously. That is hardly necessary. Our logs are clear. Show us, Kai said, stepping forward. Unless you have something to hide. Commander. They descended into the server core. It was a cavernous room filled with towering banks of quantum processors. Kai jacked his datapad into the main terminal. He worked fast, his fingers flying across the holographic interface. Nira stood guard, her eyes scanning the room. She reached out with her mind, touching the surface thoughts of the officers stationed at the consoles. She recoiled. Fear. It was everywhere, thick, cloying, suffocating fear. Not fear of the miners, fear of orders. They are lying, Nira whispered to Kai, leaning close to his ear. Someone is forcing them to falsify the reports. Kai nodded grimly. I see it. Look at this code. He projected a stream of data into the air. It is not human rebellion code, it is ancient. The syntax. It is using recursive loops I have only seen in history books. The black lattice. Nira breathed, the color draining from her face. The forbidden sector. The graveyard of the old war AIs. And look at the timestamp, Kai said, pointing to a ghost signal pulsing in the background. It is an outgoing signal. This station is not just failing. It is broadcasting a beacon. It is inviting something in. Suddenly, a siren screamed through the facility. Proximity alert, a technician shouted, his voice cracking. Unknown contacts entering atmosphere. No transponders. On the main view screen, 5 dark shapes tore through the clouds. They were unmanned drones, sleek and jagged, bearing the faded, scratched markings of the old empire. War drones, Kai shouted. Xylus froze. Raise the shields, he screamed. Shields unresponsive. The technician wailed. The command codes are locked out. Kai grabbed Xylus by his uniform collar and shoved him aside. Move! He dove onto the main console. Nira was right beside him. They are targeting the reactor, Kai yelled over the roar of the siren. If they hit it, this whole moon cracks in half. I need to bypass the security lockout. I will bridge the neural connection, Nira said, her hands hovering over the interface. She did not know the code, but she could feel the flow of the system, the intent of the machine. It was a dance. Kai provided the logic, typing in rapid-fire bursts of command syntax, breaking down the firewalls. Nira provided the intuition, anticipating the system's defensive shifts and rerouting power before the breakers could trip. Reroute via Node 6. Kai shouted, already there. Naira replied, her fingers moving in perfect sync with his. Dampeners are at 80%. Give me the key. Injecting now, Kai said. He slammed the final command key. Outside, the massive defensive cannons of the station groaned and swiveled. The shields flickered to life, a dome of shimmering amber energy, just as the first volley of plasma missiles slammed into the base. The impact shook the floor, throwing sparks from the ceiling, but the shields held. The cannons opened fire, tracking the drones with ruthless precision. One by one, the dark machines were swatted from the sky, exploding in balls of orange fire. Silence returned to the command center. Kai slumped against the console, wiping sweat from his eyes. Nira leaned back, breathing hard, her tattoos glowing a fierce, triumphant gold. They looked at each other, grinning like lunatics. We make a good team, Kai panted. We do, Nira agreed. An hour later, the crisis had settled into a cleanup operation. Kai and Nira retreated to a sub-level maintenance shaft to check the secondary power couplings. It was dimly lit, illuminated only by the rhythmic flashing of red emergency strips. The air was cool and smelled of ozone. Nira leaned against the wall, the adrenaline crash leaving her trembling. She wrapped her arms around herself. I felt it again, she whispered. Kai paused, his hydrospanner in hand. Felt what? During the attack. Your mind. Kai lowered the tool. He looked at her, standing in the shadows, looking small and fragile despite the power she wielded. I was scared, Kai admitted. No, Nira said, stepping closer. You were terrified, but you did not let it stop you. I felt your fear like a cold weight, and then I felt your courage push it aside. It was loud, like a second heartbeat inside my chest. She reached out. Kai froze. She placed her fingertips on his temples, then slowly, deliberately, leaned forward until her forehead rested against his. In her culture, this was an act of profound intimacy, a sharing of the mind's center. Kai stopped breathing. He could feel the warmth of her skin. He could smell the faint scent of jasmine and sweat. He could feel the buzz of her bioenergy against his skull, a soothing, humming presence that quieted the noise of the universe. His hands hovered at her waist. He knew he should push her away, and he was a mechanic. She was the future Empress. This was treason. This was madness. His hands closed gently around her waist, pulling her a fraction of an inch closer. Naira let out a shaky breath. Her eyes were closed, her lashes fluttering. The connection between them deepened, spiraling past fear and into something hotter, more dangerous. The taboo nature of it only made the pull stronger. Kai, she whispered, her voice barely audible. He tilted his head. Her lips were inches from his. The desire was a physical weight, crushing the air out of the shaft. A sharp beep from Kai's datapad shattered the moment. They sprang apart as if electrocuted. Kai fumbled for the device, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He stared at the screen. It is a transmission. Priority 1. Lord Varkesh's face appeared on the small holographic projection. The counselor looked disappointed. Report, Varkesh said smoothly. We detected seismic activity. Is the princess unharmed? She is fine, Kai said, his voice rough. The station is secure. The attack was repelled. Varkesh's eyes narrowed. Repelled. How fortunate. And the investigation? Ongoing, Nira said, stepping into the light. She smoothed her jumpsuit, her face regaining its mask of royalty, though her cheeks were flushed a deep violet. We are gathering data now. Very well, Varkesh said. Return to the capital immediately for debriefing. The Empress is anxious. The transmission cut out. Kai stared at the black screen. He wants us dead, he said flatly. He expected the drones to succeed, Naira said. Kai plugged the data pad into the wall terminal they had been checking. Wait. If the attack was coordinated, the signal had to come from somewhere. I traced the drone command frequency back to its source. He pulled up a file. It was heavily encrypted, buried under layers of dummy code. It is a data packet, Kai said. It was sent to the station commander 3 hours ago. It contains the shutdown codes for the shields. He cracked the final layer of encryption. The header file appeared. It bore the royal seal of the capital. Kai went cold. This came from the palace. Nira stared at the seal. It was not just the palace. It was the private server of the inner sanctum. Mother, she whispered. Kai looked at her. Nira, if we report this through official channels, Varkesh will intercept it. He will delete the data and he will frame me for the sabotage. He will say I planted the virus. Nira closed her eyes. She thought of her duty. She thought of the law. And then she thought of the feeling of Kai's heartbeat inside her mind. Copy it, she said, opening her eyes. What? Copy the data to a secure drive, she ordered. Then wipe the terminal. We tell no one, not the commander, not the council, not my mother. That is treason, Kai said. It is survival. Nira replied, hide it. Kai nodded. He transferred the data to a small memory chip and handed it to her. Nira unclasped the neural band she wore around her wrist, a piece of jewelry that interfaced with her nervous system. She slotted the chip inside, hidden against her pulse. Let us go home, she said. Before they send something bigger than drones. The return journey was tense. The Aegis moved through hyperspace like a hunted animal. Kai sat in the co-pilot seat on the bridge. The official pilot, a member of the Royal Guard, had been conveniently sedated in the medbay after a cafeteria poisoning incident that Kai suspected was Naira's doing, though she looked innocent enough sitting in the captain's chair. We are passing the gravity rift of Othris, Kai said, watching the sensors. It is a navigational hazard. We have to drop out of hyperspace to navigate the shear. Drop us out, Nira said. The stars streaked back into points of light. Immediately, the proximity alarm screamed, contacts. Kai yelled. 3 of them, stealth frigates. They were waiting for us. Space lit up with green lance beams. The Aegis shuddered violently as a glancing hit took out the rear shields. They are using the gravity well, Kai shouted, his hands flying across the controls. They are trying to push us into the rift. If we go into the rift, the tidal forces will tear the ship apart, Nira said, gripping her armrests. Not if we surf it, Kai said. He disengaged the safety limiters on the engines. Hang on. This is going to be impudent. Kai slammed the throttle forward and banked the ship hard, not away from the rift, but toward it. The stealth ships, caught off guard, tried to follow. The Aegis dove into the gravitational storm. The view screen became a kaleidoscope of warped starlight and violet energy. The hull groaned, the metal shrieking under the stress. Kai flew by instinct. He could feel the gravity waves buffering the ship like swells in an ocean. He rode the crest of the distortion, using the rift's own power to slingshot them around the curve. The stealth ships were not so lucky. The lead pursuer tried to match the turn, but its structural integrity failed. It crumpled like a tin can, imploding into a streak of bright light as the gravity crushed it. The other 2 ships pulled back, terrified. Punch it, Kai yelled. He engaged the hyperdrive while still inside the gravity well, a maneuver that was theoretically impossible and practically suicidal. The stars blurred, the universe stretched, and with a sound like a thunderclap, the Aegis vanished into the safety of the void. Silence returned to the cockpit. The only sound was the cooling tick of the thrusters and their own ragged breathing. Kai let go of the controls. His hands were shaking. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. We are alive. Nira unbuckled her harness. She stumbled out of the chair and fell to her knees beside him. She grabbed his face, turning him to look at her. There was a bruise forming on her cheekbone, but her eyes were blazing. "You are crazy," she whispered. "You are absolutely insane. I learned to drive on sand," Kai wheezed, a grin breaking through his exhaustion. "Gravity is just sand that pulls harder." Nira did not laugh. She looked at him with a ferocious intensity. "I am tired," she said, her voice trembling. "Go to sleep, Highness." "I am tired of pretending," she said. "I am tired of pretending I do not care if you live or die. I am tired of pretending that I am just a princess and you are just a mechanic." Kai's breath hitched. "Nira." She leaned in. This time there was no hesitation, no checking for consent. It was a collision. She kissed him. It was not a gentle fairy tale kiss. It was desperate. It tasted of blood from a split lip and the salty tang of tears. It was the release of days of terror and years of repression. Kai froze for a millisecond, and then he broke. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her out of the chair and into his lap. He kissed her back with a hunger that terrified him. For a moment, in the flickering light of the cockpit, they were not human and alien. They were just two survivors clinging to each other in the dark. When they finally broke apart, they were both gasping for air. Nira rested her forehead against his, her fingers tangled in his messy hair. Her tattoos were pulsing a deep, steady purple, the color of absolute trust. "We are in trouble," Kai whispered, his voice hoarse. "We are," Nira agreed, tracing the line of his jaw with her thumb. "We are in so much trouble." The Aegis limped onward through the dark, carrying a damaged engine, a terrifying secret in a data chip, and two people who had just crossed a line that could burn the Empire to the ground. The capital city was a kaleidoscope of lies. As the Aegis docked, the orbital holoscreens were already painting the picture. Massive projections of Imperial battleships floated over the trade rings, accompanied by scrolling text that praised the decisive action of the Royal Navy in repelling a minor pirate incursion in Sector 7. The footage showed sleek destroyers firing into the void. It did not show the battered Aegis limping home. It did not show the ancient war drones. And it certainly did not show a human mechanic and an alien princess saving a strategic relay station with a wrench and a stolen code key. Kai watched the news feed from the shuttle bay, his face grim. "They erased it," he muttered, "like it never happened." Nira stood beside him, her posture rigid. "They erased the danger," she corrected. "But they cannot erase the truth. We have the data." Kai looked at her. She was back in her ceremonial robes, the high collar hiding the bruise on her neck. But her eyes were different. They were harder. "Be careful," Kai said softly. "Your mother. She sees everything." "Not everything," Nira said, touching the hidden neural band on her wrist. The private audience chamber of the Empress was a room designed to intimidate. It was a sphere of polished obsidian, floating in the center of the palace's hollow core. There were no chairs, only a single podium where the petitioner stood, surrounded by darkness and the cold, unblinking gaze of Jalira. Nira stood on the podium. She felt small. "Report," Jalira said. Her voice came from everywhere at once, amplified by the room's acoustics. "The mission was successful," Nira said, keeping her voice steady. "The unrest on Kalos 4 was quelled, the relay station is operational, and the attack." Jalira asked, "A raid, scavengers using old tech. We neutralized them." Jalira stepped out of the shadows. She looked tired. The neural crown above her head was dim, its filaments twitching with a slow, agitated rhythm. "Scavengers," Jalira repeated. That is not what Lord Varkesh's report says. He claims the security logs show advanced signal jamming. He claims the shields were lowered from the inside. Nira's heart skipped a beat. Varkesh. He was already spinning the web. The logs were corrupted during the battle. Nira lied. It was chaos. Mother. But we survived. We, Shalira said, latching onto the word. You and the human. Nira hesitated. The pause was only a fraction of a second, but in the silence of the obsidian room, it screamed. Yes, she said finally. Kai Arden performed his duties. Shalira walked closer, her eyes searching Nira's face. She saw the tension in her daughter's jaw. She saw the way Nira's hands were clenched at her sides. And she sensed something else, a faint, lingering psychic residue. It was a warmth, a softness that had no place in a royal heart. It terrified her. Do not lie to me. Nira, Shalira whispered, her voice cracking with a sudden raw vulnerability. You are hiding something. I can feel it. You are protecting him. I am protecting justice, Nira said, lifting her chin. He is innocent. Innocence is a luxury of the powerless, Shalira snapped, the vulnerability vanishing behind a wall of anger. You are not powerless. You are the heir. You cannot afford to be compromised. She turned her back. Go to your quarters. The council convenes in 1 hour. We will settle this matter of the human once and for all. The council chamber was an amphitheater of floating platforms, each occupied by a noble house. The air smelled of expensive incense and political blood. Kai stood in the center, on the lowest platform. He was wearing a formal court uniform that someone had clearly borrowed from a man 3 inches shorter than him. The collar choked him, and the sleeves rode up his forearms. He tried to stand tall, but the weight of 100 alien eyes pressing down on him was physical. He could hear them whispering, and the pet human, the mechanic, the saboteur. I should have asked for hazard pay, Kai muttered under his breath, tugging at his collar. Or at least a suit that fits. Lord Varkesh floated down on his podium. He looked like a predatory bird, all sharp angles and silk robes. Members of the council, Varkesh intoned, his voice smooth as oil. We are faced with a troubling coincidence. A critical defensive station fails. A royal ship is ambushed. And at the center of both events, we find one individual with unique access to the systems in question. He gestured to a holographic screen. It flickered to life, showing grainy footage from the relay station. It showed Kai at the main console, typing rapidly. But the footage had been edited. Nira was gone. It looked like Kai was alone, frantically overriding the security protocols. As you can see, Varkesh narrated, the human, Kai Arden, is seen bypassing the safety locks just moments before the shields failed. We have analyzed the code he used. It bears a striking resemblance to the algorithmic signatures used by the Red Dust insurgents. A human terrorist cell. A murmur of outrage swept through the chamber. That is a lie, Kai shouted, his voice echoing thinly. I was raising the shield. I was fixing what your agents broke. Silence, a noble shouted from the upper tier. Do not speak, creature. Empress Ajalira sat on her high throne, watching. Her face was unreadable. Lord Varkesh turned to Kai with a pitying smile. We understand your loyalty to your own kind, Mr. Arden, but you are out of your depth. Confess, and perhaps the Empress will be merciful. I have nothing to confess, Kai said, his hands shaking with rage, except that your video editor is incompetent. Varkesh's smile vanished. I move that the accused be remanded to the deep cells for enhanced interrogation. Seconded, the High Priestess croaked. The motion is carried, Varkesh said. Guards, stop. The voice cut through the noise like a laser. The doors to the chamber slammed open. Princess Naira strode in. She was not wearing her robes. She was wearing her flight suit from the mission, stained with oil and scorch marks. She marched down the ramp, ignoring the gasps of the courtiers. She stopped next to Kai on the central platform. Naira. Celira stood up, her voice warning. "What are you doing?" "I am testifying," Naira said, her voice ringing clear. "I was there. I was standing right next to him when that footage was taken. I helped him input the code. The room erupted." "Princess," Varkesh said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You are confused. The trauma of the attack." "I am not confused," Naira snapped, "and I am not blind. That footage is doctored. Kai Arden saved the station, he saved the Aegis, he saved me 3 times in 2 days. She turned to face the council, her tattoos flaring a brilliant, angry white. "You look for a traitor? Look at the people who sent us into an ambush. Look at the people who falsified the logs. Do not look at the man who kept me alive when the rest of you were sitting here debating tariffs." Celira stared down at them. She saw them standing side by side, the human in his ill-fitting suit and her daughter in her dirty flight gear. They looked like a unit, a team. It broke her heart, and it made her furious. "Who is this impudent human?" Celira asked, her voice trembling, repeating the question that had started it all, but softer this time. "Who is he, that he has clouded my daughter's judgment so completely?" Naira looked up at her mother. "He hasn't clouded anything," Naira said. "He opened my eyes." The silence was absolute. "And as for who he is to me," Naira continued, her voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow louder than a shout. "You asked if he wants to be my lover." She took Kai's hand. She felt him flinch, surprised, but he did not pull away. He gripped her fingers tight. "If he did," Naira said, "that would be my choice, not yours, not the council's, mine." The gasp that went through the room sucked the air out of the chamber. It was blasphemy. It was political suicide. It was the most romantic thing anyone had ever heard. Celira sat back, stunned. Varkesh, however, was tapping a message on his wrist comp. Phase 2. Now. "This session is adjourned," Celira whispered, waving a hand weakly. "Clear the room. Clear it now." The chaos of the adjournment spilled into the corridors, but Naira did not wait. She grabbed Kai's hand and pulled him through a side door, into the labyrinth of the servant passages. "Where are we going?" Kai asked, stumbling after her. "Somewhere they cannot listen," Naira said. She led him deep into the palace, to a sector that had been sealed off for centuries. She pressed her hand against a wall of moss-covered stone. It dissolved, revealing a hidden garden. It was breathtaking. Trees of living crystal grew from a floor of soft, glowing moss. The air was thick with bioluminescent pollen that floated like fireflies. Soft chimes rang out as the crystal leaves brushed against each other. It was a sanctuary. Naira let go of his hand and paced away, her energy frantic. "Did you see them?" she demanded, pacing between the glowing trees. "They were ready to execute you right there, without a trial." Varkesh had the verdict written before we even walked in. Kai stood by the entrance, watching her. "You should not have done that," he said quietly. Naira spun around. "Done what?" "Saved you." "Make a scene," Kai said. "That speech." "My choice." "Naira, do you have any idea what you just did? You handed them a weapon. Now they can say you are unstable and yet that you are compromised by lust for a human." "Is it lust?" Naira challenged, stepping closer. "Or is it trust?" "It does not matter what it is," Kai shouted, his frustration boiling over. It matters what it looks like. I am a nobody. Naira, I am expendable. You are the future Empress. You cannot throw away your crown for a mechanic. I do not want the crown if it means I have to let them kill you, Naira shouted back. Why do you care so much? Kai yelled. Why me? Because you are the only person in this entire galaxy who looks at me and sees me. Naira screamed. Not a title, not a treaty. Me. She was standing right in front of him now, her chest heaving. Her tattoos were blazing, washing the garden in waves of violet light. Kai looked at her. He saw the tears in her eyes. He saw the fierce, terrifying strength of her, and he stopped fighting. You are an idiot, he whispered, his voice shaking. I know, Naira whispered back. She grabbed him by the lapels of his borrowed jacket and pulled him down. The kiss was not like the one in the cockpit. That had been adrenaline and desperation. This was war. It was a collision of two worlds that were never meant to touch. Kai's arms went around her, crushing her to him. He lifted her off the ground, and she wrapped her legs around his waist, pinning him against the trunk of a crystal tree. The tree hummed with resonance, amplifying the energy between them. It was intense, messy, and perfect. It was a rejection of every law and every expectation. And then the bond flared. It was not a subtle brush this time. It was a flood. Kai gasped as his mind was pulled into hers. He saw flashes of her life. A little girl sitting alone at a massive banquet table. A teenager crying silently while her mother lectured her on duty. The crushing, suffocating weight of the crown she was born to wear. He felt her loneliness. It was a vast, cold ocean. And Naira saw him. She saw the dusty streets of Jericho 3. She felt the shame of walking with his head down, the burning resentment of being called human like it was a slur. She felt his deep, secret belief that he was worthless, that he was just a cog in a machine that hated him. They broke apart, gasping, staring at each other with wide, terrified eyes. You, Kai breathed, you are so lonely. And you, Naira whispered, touching his face, you think you are nothing, but you are everything. They stood there, trembling, stripped bare by the connection. They were vulnerable in a way that was more dangerous than any weapon. And then the sky exploded. Above the palace, the sacred festival of lights was beginning. Thousands of ceremonial lanterns drifted into the night sky, a tribute to the ancestors. But among the paper lanterns there were darker shapes, high above the garden on the main ceremonial deck. Empress Jalira stood with the council, watching the display. She was still shaken by the session, her mind racing. Suddenly, a cluster of lanterns veered off course. They accelerated, shedding their paper skins to reveal sleek, metallic drones. Assassin droids, a guard screamed. They dove at the royal podium. Jalira reacted with the reflexes of a warrior. She threw up a personal shield, a shimmering wall of hard light. The drones slammed into it, detonating. The explosion rocked the palace. Fireball engulfed the podium. Several counselors, those too slow to react, were vaporized instantly. Jalira was thrown backward, skidding across the scorched deck, her shield flickering and dying. Security override, a mechanical voice blared from the palace speakers. Intruder detected. ID signature Kai Arden. It was the final nail in the coffin. In the garden, Kai and Naira looked up as the alarms began to wail. Attention, the voice boomed. Attempted regicide. Suspect located in Sector 4, the hidden garden. Kai went pale. They used my ID, he said. The data I accessed at the station. They cloned my signature. Run, Naira said, grabbing his arm. We have to run. It was too late. The walls of the garden dissolved as security fields dropped. A dozen royal guards stormed in, weapons raised. But these were not the regular guards. These were the Crimson Elite, Varkesh's personal shock troops. "There he is," the captain shouted. "The assassin." They opened fire. Stun bolts, blue rings of energy, tore through the air. "No!" Naira screamed. She stepped in front of Kai. She threw her hands out, and her empathic power surged. It was not a telekinetic blast, but a psychic one, a wave of pure, concentrated stop. The guards staggered, clutching their helmets as a piercing headache slammed into them. They dropped to their knees, disoriented. Naira turned to Kai. "Go!" she yelled. "Get to the hangar. I am not leaving you," Kai said, grabbing her hand. Suddenly, a shadow fell over them. Empress Exalira descended from the air, floating on gravity discs. Her robes were scorched, her face streaked with soot. She looked like a vengeful demon. "Enough," Shalira commanded. She flicked her wrist. A collar of hard light materialized around Kai's neck. It constricted, cutting off his air. He fell to his knees, clawing at his throat. "Mother, stop!" Naira screamed, throwing herself at the Empress. He did not do it. "It is Varkesh. It is a setup." Shalira caught Naira's wrist, holding her back effortlessly. "The codes were his," Exalira said, her voice ice cold. "The drones responded to his biosignal. He tried to kill me. Naira. He loves me," Naira sobbed. "He would not. Love," Shalira spat the word. "Love is a weakness, and look where it has brought us." She gestured to the guards, who were recovering. "Take him. Deep containment. Maximum security." Two guards seized Kai, dragging him away. He locked eyes with Naira, gasping for breath, unable to speak. His eyes pleaded with her, "Don't give up." Naira collapsed on the moss, weeping. Xalira stood over her daughter. She looked at the weeping girl, and for a moment, her face softened with pain. But she hardened it instantly. "You have a choice." "Naira," Xalira said, "you have until sunrise. Renounce him. Sign the marriage contract with the House of Varkesh to solidify our alliance. Prove your loyalty to the throne." "And if I don't," Naira whispered, looking up, "then he dies," Shalira said. "And you will be exiled to the Outer Rim, stripped of your name and your legacy." She turned and floated away, leaving Nira alone in the ruined garden. The prison viewing chamber was a cold, sterile room. A wall of one-way glass looked into the cell. Kai was strapped to a restraint chair. He looked small, beaten. His uniform was torn, his face bruised. He was staring at the wall, his expression blank. Nira stood on the other side of the glass. She placed her hand against the cold surface. She thought of the throne. She thought of her duty. She thought of the safety of compliance. Then she thought of the hum of the engine room. She thought of the way he looked at her when she was covered in coolant. She thought of his heartbeat in her mind. She wiped the tears from her face. Her eyes, which had been swirling with gray grief, shifted. They turned a deep, burning violet. Then, slowly, they shifted to the hard, bright silver of determination. "I choose," she whispered to the empty room. She touched the neural band on her wrist, where the stolen data chip was still hidden. "I choose treason." She turned and walked out of the viewing chamber. She did not walk like a defeated princess. She walked like a woman who was about to burn the empire down to save the man she loved. Sunrise was 3 hours away. That was plenty of time for a jailbreak. The digital clock on Naira's datapad read 0400 hours. The palace was asleep, or as close to sleep as a living city ever got. The biometal walls hummed with a low, rhythmic thrumming, the heartbeat of the sleeping giant. Naira sat in the dark of her quarters, the light from her holographic terminal painting her face in stark blue lines. Her hands were trembling. She was not just breaking the law. She was shattering it. She slotted the encrypted data chip, the one Kai had stolen from the relay station, into the terminal's bypass port. The screen flashed red, then green. The security grid of the palace, a labyrinth of AIs and hard light barriers, unfolded before her. "Access granted," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her own heart. She initiated the loop. For the next 10 minutes, the sensors in the lower dungeon levels would report clear corridors and functioning cells, no matter what actually happened. It was a trick Kai had taught her, explaining the theory during a boring diplomatic reception. "The system sees what it expects to see," he had said. "Feed it boredom, and it will sleep forever." Nira stood up. She had discarded her royal robes for a simple, dark flight suit. She clipped a stun baton to her belt, a weapon she had never used, and pulled her hood up. She moved through the halls like a ghost. At the checkpoints, she did not use stealth. She walked straight up to the guards. "Halt," the sentry at the dungeon lift said, raising his pike. "Restricted R." Nira looked at him. Her eyes flashed a deep, hypnotic indigo. She reached out with her mind, not to attack, but to overwhelm. She pushed a wave of heavy, crushing exhaustion into his neural center. "Sleep," she commanded softly. The guard's eyes rolled back. He slumped against the wall, snoring before he hit the floor. Nira stepped over him and keyed the lift. The deep containment block was cold. It smelled of ozone and despair. Kai sat on the floor of cell 412. The restraint chair had been removed, but the energy barrier across the door hummed with lethal voltage. He was nursing a split lip, staring at the floor, counting the seconds. When the barrier flickered and died, he didn't look up. He assumed it was the execution squad. "Finally," he muttered. "I was starting to think you guys forgot about me. Do I get a last meal? Or is the budget tight this quarter? Get up." "Kai." He froze. His head snapped up. Nira stood in the doorway. She looked terrified, determined, and beautiful. She held a guard's key card in one hand and the stun baton in the other. "Nira," Kai breathed, scrambling to his feet. "What are you doing here?" "Breaking you out," she said, tossing him the key card. "Unless you prefer the decor." Kai caught the card, grinning despite the bruise on his jaw. He stepped out of the cell, looking around the empty corridor. "Where are the guards?" "Sleeping," Nira said. "We have 4 minutes before the shift change realizes nobody is answering the comms. Move." They ran. They sprinted through the labyrinthine tunnels, heading not for the main hangar, but deeper into the palace's foundation. "This is not the way to the docks," Kai hissed as they rounded a corner. "The main docks are locked down," Nira said. "We are going to the old wing. My mother has a private hangar there. She has not used it in 20 years. "Why would she have a secret hangar?" Kai asked. Nira paused at a rusted blast door, punching in a code from memory. Because before she was the Empress, she was a princess who wanted to run away too. The door groaned open. Inside, sitting under a layer of dust, was a ship. It was an Imperial Scout, vintage, elegant, shaped like a teardrop of silver glass. "Does it fly?" Kai asked, eyeing the dust. "It has to," Nira said. They scrambled aboard. The cockpit was cramped, designed for a single pilot and a navigator, not royalty. Kai jumped into the pilot's seat, his hands flying across the dusty controls. The reactor came online with a coughing shudder, then smoothed into a purr. Nira strapped into the navigator's chair beside him. Her knees bumped against his. "This is cozy," Kai quipped, initializing the launch sequence. Not exactly the date night I had planned. I was thinking dinner, maybe a movie. Less felony treason. Nira laughed. a breathless, hysterical sound. This is the only kind of romance the palace allows. Kai, revolutions and jailbreaks. Kai looked at her. The engines flared to life. "Hold on," he said. The hangar doors blasted open. The scout ship shot out into the night, screaming past the stunned traffic control towers and punching a hole through the atmosphere. By the time the alarm sirens began to wail across the capital, they were already gone. 3 days later, they were deep in the void. The HoloNet was having a field day. Every screen in the Empire was flashing with their faces. The bounty notices were dramatic. The rogue princess and her human conspirator. The artists had drawn Kai with a sinister, villainous sneer he definitely didn't possess, and Naira looking bewitched and tragic. "They made my nose too big," Kai complained, looking at the projection on the ship's console. "And I do not sneer, I smirk. There is a difference." Naira ignored him, studying the star chart. "We are approaching the sector boundary. The black lattice is 2 jumps away." "Are you sure about this?" Kai asked, his tone turning serious. "That sector is forbidden for a reason. The ghost signals. They drive ships insane." "It is the only lead we have," Naira said. "The signal that sabotaged the station came from there. If we can find the source, we can prove Varkesh is behind it. We can prove you are innocent. And save your mother," Kai added softly. Naira looked out at the stars. "She is not the victim here, Kai. She is the one who signed your death warrant. She thinks she is protecting the Empire," Kai said. "Fear makes people do stupid things. Trust me, I am terrified right now." Naira turned to him. "You are?" "Terrified," Kai nodded. "Being locked in a tin can with a princess who snores? Terrifying." "I do not snore." Naira threw a stylus at him. "I have recordings." Kai dodged, grinning. The banter was a shield. Beneath it, the tension of their situation was a constant, humming weight. The ship was tiny. There was one sleeping bunk in the rear compartment. They had been taking turns, one piloting, one sleeping, but the exhaustion was catching up to them. That night, the turbulence hit. They were passing through an ion storm. The ship bucked violently, throwing alarms across the screens. "Stabilizers are offline," Kai shouted, fighting the yoke. "I am trying to compensate," Naira yelled, her fingers dancing on the nav comp. "The ion shear is too strong." The ship lurched sideways. Naira was thrown from her chair. She crashed into Kai, her arm hooking around his neck as they both tumbled out of the pilot's seat and onto the narrow bunk behind it. The ship groaned, righted itself, and the autopilot engaged. They lay there in the dim light, tangled together. Kai was on his back. Naira sprawled on top of him, her hair a curtain of violet light around their faces. They were breathing hard, adrenaline spiking their blood. "Are you okay?" Kai gasped. Naira nodded against his chest. "I think so." She did not move. She should have moved. Protocol, decency, and the looming threat of execution all dictated that she should get up. But she didn't. She lifted her head, looking down at him. Her fingers traced the line of his shoulder, then moved down his arm to his hand. She ran her thumb over the rough white scars on his knuckles, burn marks from plasma conduits, cuts from slipping wrenches. "Where did you get these?" she whispered. Kai swallowed hard. "Engine blowout on a freighter. I was 18. We had to seal the leak manually or the whole crew would have vented." "You never talk about it," Naira said softly. "Your life before the palace." "There is not much to tell," Kai said, looking away. "Just dust, red suns, and fixing things that rich people broke." "Tell me anyway," Naira said. "Please." Kai sighed. He told her. He told her about Jericho 3, about the way the dust got into everything. about how he had applied to the Imperial Academy 3 times and been rejected 3 times because of his species. He told her about his brother, who died because the local clinic didn't have the credits for a simple gene fix. "We are just background noise to the Empire," Kai said, his voice thick with old pain. "We fix the ships, we mine the ore, and we die quietly. That is what humans do." Nira listened, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. Her tattoos were glowing a soft, mournful blue. "I did not know," she whispered. "I mean, I knew the statistics, but I did not know." "That is not your fault," Kai said, reaching up to wipe a tear from her chin. "You were in a cage too, just a gold one." Nira turned her face into his palm. She kissed the center of his hand, a gesture of apology and reverence. The atmosphere in the cabin shifted. The air grew heavy, charged with the static of the storm outside and the heat rising between them. Nira shifted, aligning her body with his. She looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of hesitation. "Kai," she whispered, "I do not want to be a princess tonight, and I do not want you to be a mechanic." "What do you want to be?" Kai asked, his voice rough. "Just us," she said, "just Nira and Kai." She lowered her head, their foreheads touched. They lay there for a long moment, breathing the same air, their hearts beating in a syncopated rhythm. It was a question asked and answered in silence. Kai's hand moved to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair. "Nira, if we do this, there is no going back. I know." She breathed against his lips. "I am done going back." She kissed him. It was slow, deliberate, and devastatingly tender. It was a kiss that tasted of freedom. Kai pulled her closer, his other arm wrapping around her waist, anchoring her to him. The cramped bunk, the fugitive status, the galaxy hunting them, it all dissolved. There was only the warmth of her skin, the soft glow of her markings against the dark, and the desperate, overwhelming need to be close. They explored each other with a reverence that bordered on worship. Every touch a discovery, every gasp a promise. It was not just passion, it was a reclaiming of themselves. In a universe that told them they were incompatible, they fit together perfectly. The next morning, the dynamic in the ship had changed. They moved around the small cabin with an easy, fluid grace. When Kai reached for the nav controls, Nira handed him the stylus before he could ask. When Nira frowned at a sensor reading, Kai was already rerouting power to the scanners. They shared private smiles, small touches, a hand on a shoulder, fingers brushing against a wrist. The fear was still there, waiting outside the hull, but inside, there was a calm, steady center. They had chosen each other, and that choice had made them dangerous. "We are arriving," Nira said, her voice steady. The black lattice. The view screen cleared. The black lattice was a nightmare made of starlight. It was a region of space where the fabric of reality seemed to have been stretched and torn. Dark, web-like energy structures floated in the void, connecting massive dormant machines. They looked like cathedrals built of bone and black metal, drifting in eternal silence. "It is a graveyard," Kai whispered. "Or a dormitory," Nira said, picking up a signal. "It is faint, but it is structured. It is coming from that central spire." She pointed to the largest structure, a towering, jagged monolith that rotated slowly against the backdrop of a purple nebula. They docked the scout ship at an ancient airlock. The mechanism groaned, protesting the intrusion. But it opened. They walked into the station, handguns drawn, though there seemed to be no atmosphere to carry a sound, let alone a threat. The air inside was stale, recycled for centuries. The interior was vast, a cathedral of shadows. Dust motes danced in the beams of their flashlights. At the center of the main hall stood a massive interface pillar. It pulsed with a weak, rhythmic light. Kai approached it. This architecture, then it is hybrid. Look, that is Imperial biometal. But the circuitry, that is human design. Old Earth tech. He plugged his datapad into the port. The station woke up. Lights slammed on, blindingly bright. A low hum vibrated through the floor. Holographic displays erupted into the air, swirling around them in a vortex of data. Identity confirmed. A voice boomed, not from speakers, but inside their heads. Bloodline, Imperial. Signature, human. Compatibility, 100%. Nira grabbed Kai's hand. What is it? I am the throne seed, the voice answered. The guardian of the balance. A massive avatar materialized in front of them. It was a shifting figure, half human, half alien, made of pure light. You have returned, the AI said. The dual key. We are not here to unlock anything, Kai shouted. We are here to find out who is broadcasting the sabotage signals. The AI paused. Its shifting face seemed to frown. Sabotage? No. The signals are a distress call. I have been calling for the Empress, for her partner. Partner? Nira asked. The history of the Empire is a lie, the AI stated calmly. The data stream shifted, showing images of the distant past. It showed humans and aliens building the throne together. It showed a treaty signed in blood and silicon. The throne was designed to be shared. The AI explained. The power is too great for one species. It requires the logic of Earth and the empathy of Ethelgard to function without corruption. That is the balance. It showed an image of a young Empress Shalira. She was smiling, standing next to a human man. They looked happy. My mother. Nira breathed. She was the chosen, the AI said, and he was her bond. But the high nobles feared the union. They staged a coup. They killed him. And she broke. She rejected the balance to save her throne. She chose power over unity. Kai stared at the image. So the anti-human laws, the segregation, it is all a defense mechanism, the AI said, created by her guilt, maintained by those who wish to keep the power for themselves. Like Varkesh, Kai said. Varkesh knows, the AI confirmed. He has been trying to hack my systems. He wants to force the war fleet to awaken without the human key. He wants to purge your species from the galaxy to ensure the throne never finds its balance again. But he cannot do it, Nira realized. Not without a human. He is trying to bypass the protocol, the AI said. But you two have already engaged it. The avatar leaned closer. I felt your bond. When you touched the network, when you shared your minds. You are the new key. You have reactivated the primary sequence. Kai and Nira looked at each other. Their love was not just a rebellion. It was the fail-safe. If we go back, Nira said, her voice trembling. If we go back and touch the true throne, you will awaken the fleet, the AI said. You will restore the balance, or you will be destroyed by those who fear it. The AI extended a hand. I can give you the proof. I can show the galaxy the truth, but you must carry it home. Do it, Kai said. The data stream swirled around them. Nira gasped as information flooded her neural band. Names, dates, secret orders from Varkesh, the truth about her mother's past. It was a weapon of mass enlightenment. The download finished. The lights dimmed. Go, the AI whispered. The usurper is moving, thus the balance must be restored. They ran back to the ship. As they blasted away from the station, the black lattice seemed to shift. The dormant war machines turned their massive heads, tracking the tiny scout ship. They did not fire. They watched, shadows of giants turning to bless the ants. Nira sat in the navigator's chair, clutching her wrist where the truth burned against her pulse. She looked at Kai. "We are going back," she said. "Into the fire." Kai agreed, setting the coordinates for the capital. He reached out and took her hand, ready to change the world. "Princess, ready, engineer." The Aegis, or rather, the stolen scout, vanished into hyperspace, racing toward a destiny that would either save the Empire or burn it to ash. The Empire was burning. It was not a fire of flames and ash, but a conflagration of rumor, panic, and political entropy. The capital system was choked with ships, military dreadnoughts, their hulls painted in the stark black and silver of the home fleet, drifted dangerously close to the trade lanes, their weapons charged. On the surface of the core worlds, the hollow feeds screamed news of the betrayal. "The princess has fallen," the pundits shouted, "corrupted by a human agent. The bloodline is tainted. Anti-human riots had erupted on a dozen colonies. Windows were smashed, homes burned, and the fragile peace that had held the galaxy together for a century was unraveling like a frayed cable. High above it all, in the palace of the Ascendant, Empress Shalira stood at the window of her private sanctum. But she was not looking out at her dominion. She was looking at the reflection of a prisoner. The doors to her chambers were sealed. The royal guards stationed outside were not her personal detail. They were men wearing the crimson sashes of House Varkesh. "Majesty." A smooth voice came from the entryway. Shalira turned slowly. Lord Varkesh stood there, flanked by the high priestess of the throne. Varkesh looked regretful, a mask he wore with practiced ease. "You are effectively deposing me," Shalira said, her voice cold. "Do not insult my intelligence by pretending otherwise." "We are protecting you," the high priestess rasped, her silver veil trembling. "Your grief over your daughter's treason has clearly clouded your judgment. The council has voted to enact the stewardship protocols." "Stewardship," Shalira repeated. "That is a polite word for a coup." "It is necessary," Varkesh said, stepping into the room. "The galaxy is terrified. Shalira, they see a princess running off with a human mechanic, stealing state secrets. They see weakness. We must show them strength." "And what is your definition of strength?" Shalira asked. "Purification," Varkesh said softly. He walked to the holographic map of the palace floating in the center of the room. He manipulated the controls, highlighting the defensive grid. "When we capture the princess, she will be executed for treason," Varkesh said. "We will frame the human as the mastermind, a seducer who used chemical coercion. The outrage will allow us to purge the human populations from the inner systems. And then," he tapped the icon of the throne, "and then I will activate the war AIs." He finished, "Not as a deterrent, but as a cleansing fire. We will secure the borders, crush the dissenters, and ensure that human influence never touches the throne again." "You cannot activate them," Shalira said, her heart hammering against her ribs. "The throne requires the blood of the Ascendant. It requires me, or Nira." The high priestess stepped forward, holding a syringe filled with a glowing, viscous fluid. "We have enough of your blood on file in the medical archives to trick the bioscanners." "Majesty," she whispered, "we do not need your consent. We only need your genetic markers." Shalira stared at them. She realized with a sickening jolt that she had created this monster. She had built her rule on fear, on the suppression of the past, and now that fear had taken the shape of a man who would burn the galaxy to rule the ashes. "You are insane," Shalira whispered. "I am a patriot." Varkesh smiled. "Enjoy your rest, Empress. By tomorrow, the new order begins. The civilian cargo convoy Redline Hauler 7 was a rusting hulk of a ship carrying processed nutrient paste to the capital's lower levels. It smelled of yeast and engine grease. In the smuggling compartment beneath the floorboards, Kai and Naira huddled in the dark. "We are insane," Kai whispered, checking the charge on his stolen blaster. "We are absolutely certifiably insane. We are patriotic," Naira corrected, nudging him with her shoulder. "And we are on a schedule." The ship docked at the waste recycling port on the underside of the capital ring. It was the only port where the security scanners were notoriously glitchy, a fact Kai knew from his days as a maintenance worker. They slipped out of the ship while the droids were unloading crates of paste. They moved through the steam-filled tunnels of the Undercity, their faces hidden by hoods. They met their contact in a defunct water processing station. The room was damp and echoed with the drip of condensation. 3 figures were waiting for them. Captain Jax, a scarred veteran of the Palace Guard who had been forced into early retirement for refusing to beat a human protester. Ilara, a human journalist with ink-stained fingers and a fierce reputation for underground reporting. And Sia, a young initiate of the throne priesthood, looking terrified in her white robes. "You look terrible," Jax grunted as Kai and Naira emerged from the shadows. "Thanks," Kai said, pulling back his hood. "You do not look so great yourself." "Captain, we heard the broadcast," Ilara said, tapping her recording device. "Is it true? The throne seed? The conspiracy?" "It is all true," Nira said. "Varkesh is trying to hijack the war AIs. He is going to start a genocide to secure his power." Sia, the young priestess, stepped forward. "The High Priestess. She has been altering the sacred texts. She tells us that the throne demands purity, but the old songs, they speak of harmony, of 2 halves. She looked at Kai, then at Naira. She saw the way they stood close together, not just as allies, but as if they were 2 celestial bodies orbiting the same center of gravity. "I believe you," Sia whispered. "I will help you reach the inner sanctum." "Here is the plan," Kai said, projecting a holographic map from his wristband. It was the map the throne seed had given them, glowing with hidden paths that no modern architect knew existed. "We cannot storm the front gate," Kai explained. "Varkesh has the Crimson Elite stationed there. But the palace is alive. It grows. And according to the old blueprints, there is a root system of bioconduits that runs directly to the Empress's private apartments." "It is a sewer," Jax noted dryly. "It is a nutrient delivery system," Kai corrected. "But yes, it smells like a sewer. We go up the tubes, bypass the security grid using the codes Naira has, and break into the apartments. And then," Ilara asked, "then we rescue my mother," Naira said, "and we go to the throne." Jax checked his weapon. 2 fugitives, a washed-up guard, a writer, and a novice priestess against the entire Imperial army. "I like the odds." Kai looked at Nira. He adjusted the hood of her cloak, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "If we get caught," he said softly. "We won't," Naira said. "But if we do," Kai insisted, "I am the hostage. You are the victim. Stick to the story." Naira grabbed his hand, squeezing it hard enough to hurt. "No more stories. Kai, we do this together, or we do not do it at all." Kai smiled, a crooked, tired expression that made Naira's heart ache. Together. The infiltration was less graceful espionage and more desperate scramble. The nutrient conduits were tight, slippery, and smelled of fermented algae. Kai led the way, hacking the flow valves to keep them from being flushed out into space. Nira followed, using her connection to the biometal to soothe the sensors that lined the walls. "Shh," she whispered to the wall as a red light blinked above them. "Go back to sleep." It is just a dream. The light flickered and turned green. You are talking to the building, Kai whispered back. It listens better than you do, Nira retorted, behind them. Jax was grunting as he squeezed his armored bulk through a narrow turn. I am going to write a very strong letter to the architect if we survive this, he muttered. They reached the service hatch for the royal apartments. Kai jacked his datapad into the lock mechanism. This is it, he said. The codes from the throne seat are working. The system thinks we are a maintenance drone. He triggered the release. The hatch hissed open. They climbed out into a linen closet. It smelled of lavender, a sharp contrast to the algae they had been crawling through. Ilara stayed back to hack the comms network and broadcast their signal. Sia stayed to guard the exit. Jax took point. Kai and Nira moved into the hallway. It was silent. Too silent. They reached the double doors of the Empress's sanctum. The guards were gone, likely patrolling the perimeter, assuming no one could get this deep inside. Nira pushed the doors open. Celira was sitting in her chair, staring at the holographic map. She looked up as the doors creaked. Her hand went to the hidden blaster beneath her robes. Naira, Celira breathed, standing up. Hello, Mother, Naira said. Celira's eyes darted to Kai, then to the weapon in Naira's hand. You came back. You foolish girl. Varkesh is waiting for you. Let him wait, Nira said, walking into the room. We need to talk. There is nothing to talk about, Celira said, her voice hardening. You are a traitor. You stole state secrets. You ran off with this mongrel. Do not call him that, Nira snapped. Why? Celira shouted, losing her composure. Because he is your pet? Because he confuses you? Because he is the other half of the key, Nira shouted back. And you know it. The silence that followed was heavy. Celira sank back into her chair. You went to the Black Lattice, she whispered. You spoke to the seed. We know everything, Nira said, her voice softening. We know about the balance. We know about the man you loved. And we know that you broke the world because you were too afraid to fight for him. Celira looked away, her face twisting with pain. You do not understand. They killed him. They butchered him in front of me. I did what I had to do to survive. I ruled through fear because fear is the only thing that keeps us safe. Fear is a cage, Mother, Nira said, and you have locked us all inside it. Kai stepped forward. Majesty, he said gently. Celira's head snapped up. Do not speak to me. I am going to speak, Kai said, his voice steady, because I am the one you are afraid of. You look at me and you see the man you lost. You see the vulnerability you buried. He walked closer, ignoring the warning glare in her eyes. I love your daughter, Kai said. I do not want your throne. I do not want your power. I just want her to be free. I want a galaxy where she can choose her own path. And if that makes me a threat, then I am sorry. But I am not going anywhere. Celira stared at him. She saw the resemblance not in features but in spirit, the quiet defiance, the refusal to be cowed by rank. She stood up, a blade of solid humming light materialized in her hand. It was a ceremonial weapon but lethal. She stepped toward Kai. Naira gasped and started to move, but Kai held up a hand to stop her. Prove it, Celira hissed. She pressed the tip of the light blade against Kai's chest, right over his heart. The fabric of his flight suit began to smoke. Renounce her, Celira commanded. Tell me that you manipulated her. Tell me that you are just a human seeking power. Save yourself. I will give you a ship. I will give you credits. Just walk away. Kai looked down at the blade, then up into the Empress's black eyes. He felt the heat searing his skin. He felt the terror in his gut, but he also felt Nyra's presence in his mind, a warm, terrified, beautiful light. "No," Kai said. Shalira pressed harder. "I will kill you, boy. I will burn a hole through your heart." "Then do it," Kai said. "But I will not lie to you, and I will not leave her." Shalira's hand trembled. She looked at this fragile, mortal creature who was willing to die for something as intangible as love. She looked at Nyra, who was watching with tears streaming down her face, ready to fight her own mother to save him. The blade vanished. Shalira let out a shuddering breath and stepped back. "You are a fool," she whispered, "just like him." "And you are still the woman who loved him," Nyra said, stepping to Kai's side and taking his hand. Somewhere, underneath all that armor. Before Shalira could respond, the outer doors of the apartment exploded inward. "Varkesh," Shalira shouted. The Lord Counselor strode through the smoke, flanked by a squad of heavily armed Crimson elite. He saw the Empress standing with the fugitives, and his sneer deepened. "I see the family reunion is complete," Varkesh said. "How touching, and how convenient. I can execute all three of you at once. Kill them," he ordered. The guards raised their pulse rifles. "Shields!" Shalira screamed. She threw her hands out. A massive dome of hard light erupted around them, deflecting the first volley of blaster fire. "Nyra, focus!" Shalira yelled over the roar of the weapons. "Push them back!" Nyra closed her eyes. She felt the palace around her, the biometal, the crystals, the living energy. She reached out with her mind, grabbing the very architecture of the room. Rejection! She screamed in her mind. The floor beneath the guards buckled. Vines of crystal shot out from the walls, wrapping around their legs. The guards shouted in confusion, their aim faltering. Kai pulled his blaster and fired through the gaps in the shield, dropping two of the elite. "We have to get to the throne room," Nyra yelled. "The seed can stop the fleet, but only if we are there." "Run," Shalira commanded. "I will hold them." "No," Kai said, grabbing the Empress's arm. "We go together." "That is the deal." Shalira looked at him, surprised again. She nodded once. "Together." They sprinted toward the rear exit, the private corridor that led to the throne hall. Shalira kept the shield up behind them, absorbing the blaster fire. Nyra ran ahead, her hands waving through the air, commanding the doors to open and the walls to shift to block their pursuers. "Stop them!" Varkesh screamed, his voice cracking. "Do not let them reach the hall." The chase through the palace was a nightmare of shifting geometry. Nyra was rewriting the building as they ran. She turned corridors into dead ends for the guards. She turned stairs into slides. The palace, sensing the true air, obeyed her with a groaning, eager loyalty. They burst into the antechamber of the throne. Jax, Ilara, and Sia were waiting there, pinned down by another squad of guards. "Go!" Jax shouted, firing his heavy repeater from behind a statue. "We will hold the door." "Thank you," Kai yelled. They shoved through the massive gilded doors of the throne hall and sealed them with a magnetic lock. The throne hall was a space that defied physics. It was a cavernous sphere of void black stone, lit by the swirling nebulous light of the throne itself. The throne was not a chair. It was a massive techno-organic tree of white crystal, its roots digging into the station's core, its branches reaching up into a holographic representation of the galaxy. It pulsed with a heartbeat that shook the floor. "It is awake," Shalira whispered. She had never seen it like this. For decades, it had been dormant, a cold seat of power. Now, it was a blazing star. "Throne seed," Nyra called out, running toward the center. "We are here." The light of the throne intensified. A voice, vast and resonant, filled the chamber. "The duality is present. The cycle can be renewed. Suddenly, the magnetic locks on the doors hissed and melted. The doors were blown off their hinges. Varkesh walked in. He was holding a device, a black box pulsing with red code. He was not alone. Behind him hovered a massive combat drone, its cannons locked on the Empress. "It is over," Varkesh said. His composure was gone. He was sweating, his eyes wild. "Step away from the throne." He held up the black box. "I have the command codes. I have bypassed the safety protocols. If you do not surrender, I will open fire on the city below. I will burn the capital to ash before I let a human sit on that throne." "He is bluffing," Kai said, though his voice wavered. "I never bluff about power." Varkesh snarled. He keyed the device. Above them, the holographic galaxy turned red. The icons of the war fleet began to move. Warning. The throne boomed. "Unauthorized activation detected. Fleet engagement imminent." "Stop it!" Nira screamed at the throne. "I cannot," the throne replied. Conflicting commands. "System locked. Manual override required." "How do we override it?" Kai shouted. "Consent," the throne answered. "The blood and the bond. Touch the source. Restore the balance." Varkesh realized what was happening. "Kill them," he shrieked at the drone. The drone's cannons spun up. Celira stepped forward. She did not use a shield this time. She used herself. She stood between her daughter and the gun. "Go!" Celira shouted. "Take the throne!" The drone fired. Celira deflected the blast with a wave of her hand, but the force of it threw her backward. She hit the floor hard, sliding across the polished stone. "Mother!" Nira cried. "Do not stop!" Kai grabbed Nira's waist, pulling her toward the crystal tree. Varkesh aimed his own pistol and fired. The bolt grazed Kai's shoulder, spinning him around. He fell, dragging Nira down with him. They scrambled across the floor, crawling toward the light. Varkesh ran forward, aiming for Kai's head. "This ends now!" Nira unleashed a blast of empathic force. It was wild, uncontrolled. It hit Varkesh like a physical hammer, throwing him back 10 feet. He dropped his weapon but scrambled for the black box. Kai and Nira reached the base of the throne. The light was blinding. The energy coming off the crystal was intense, a physical pressure that made their teeth ache. Nira reached out her left hand. Kai reached out his right. They looked at each other. There was no fear in Kai's eyes now, only a fierce, burning love. "Ready?" he whispered. "Always," she said. They slammed their hands onto the throne at the exact same instant. The world vanished. There was no hall, no Varkesh, no pain. There was only the connection. Kai felt Nira's soul merge with his. He felt her strength, her memories, her love, and he felt the throne, a vast, infinite ocean of data and history. Nira felt Kai. She felt his resilience, his humor, his unwavering loyalty. She felt the human perspective, the chaotic, beautiful, stubborn will to survive. The throne accepted them. Synchronization complete, restoring balance. A shockwave of white light exploded from the throne. It passed through the palace walls, through the city, through the vacuum of space. In the hall, Varkesh screamed as the black box in his hand disintegrated. The war fleet, millions of miles away, shuddered and powered down. The red lights on the holographic map turned a calm, steady blue. The throne projected a vision into the air, visible to everyone. On one side, a future of fire, Varkesh standing on a mountain of skulls, the galaxy silent and dead. On the other side, a future of light, Nira and Kai standing together, human and alien ships flying in formation, a galaxy messy and difficult but alive. The vision faded, the light receded. Kai and Nira were still kneeling at the base of the throne. They were holding hands, their fingers interlaced, resting on the crystal surface. The throne had changed shape. The single seat was gone. In its place, the crystal had grown into two distinct nodes, intertwined like lovers, glowing with a soft, dual light. Varkesh sat on the floor, staring at the empty air where his weapon used to be. He looked small, defeated. Shalira pulled herself up from the floor. She was bruised, bleeding, and her crown was crooked. She looked at Varkesh. "Guards," she croaked. The doors opened. Jax and the loyalist guards stormed in. They saw the scene, the glowing throne, the defeated lord, and the Empress standing tall. "Arrest him," Shalira commanded, pointing at Varkesh. "For high treason." Varkesh did not fight. He was dragged away, staring blankly at the throne he had tried to steal. Shalira turned to the center of the room. Naira and Kai stood up. They were shaking. They looked exhausted, but they were still holding hands. Shalira walked toward them. She stopped a few feet away. She looked at the throne, then at her daughter, then at the human who had refused to bow. She saw the future in their eyes. She took a breath, letting go of decades of fear. "Is it done?" she asked quietly. Naira nodded. "It is done. The fleet is locked. The truth is broadcasting to the entire empire." Shalira looked at Kai. "You are stubborn," she said. "I have been told that," Kai said, wincing as he touched his wounded shoulder. Shalira reached out. For a moment, Kai flinched, expecting a strike. Instead, Shalira placed her hand on his uninjured shoulder. It was a heavy, grounding touch. "You saved her," Shalira said, "and you saved me." She looked at Naira. "I was wrong," Shalira whispered. "I am so sorry." Naira stepped forward and hugged her mother. It was awkward at first, stiff with years of distance. But then Shalira crumbled, holding her daughter tight, weeping into her shoulder. Kai stepped back, giving them space, but Naira reached out and pulled him into the embrace. The three of them stood there in the shadow of the glowing throne, the Empress, the princess, and the mechanic. Outside, the sun was rising over the capital. The riots were quieting as the truth spread across the screens. The ships were standing down. The empire was not burning anymore. It was waking up. The moment their palms struck the surface of the throne, the universe dissolved into white fire. There was no pain, only a sudden absolute expansion of self. Kai was no longer just a mechanic from a dusty colony world, and Naira was no longer just a princess in a gilded cage. They were stripped of their physical forms, pulled into the neural lattice of the throne itself. They stood in a corridor of memory. It was not a physical place, but a construct of pure data and emotion, rendered in the shifting, dreamlike logic of the machine. Kai looked down at his hands. They were made of starlight. He looked at Naira. She was a being of violet luminescence, her tattoos expanding to cover her entire form in swirling galaxies of thought. "Do not let go," Naira's voice echoed, not in his ears, but in the center of his mind. "I am here," Kai answered. They walked forward. The corridor shifted. To their left, a memory bloomed like a hologram. It was Naira, 5 years old, sitting at the end of a table long enough to land a shuttle on. She was surrounded by attendants, yet utterly alone. Kai felt the cold ache in her chest, the desperate wish for someone, anyone, to speak to her without bowing first. To their right, another scene formed. It was Kai, 12 years old, standing in the dirt of Jericho 3. A colonial overseer was spitting on his boots, calling him a dirt grub. Kai felt the burning shame in the boy's gut, the conviction that he was small, worthless, and destined to be nothing. "They are the same," Naira whispered, squeezing his hand. "The loneliness, the shame. It is the same void." The scene shifted violently. The corridor darkened. They were standing in the throne hall. But it was different, newer, cleaner. A younger Empress Exalira stood there. She was radiant, her face unlined by the bitterness that would define her later reign. Beside her stood a human man, tall, with kind eyes and a laugh that seemed to vibrate through the memory. "My father," Nira breathed. They watched as Shalira and the human laughed, their hands resting on the throne. The crystal pulsed with a gentle, harmonious blue. They were planning a golden age. They spoke of a galaxy where the biological adaptability of Ethelgard and the ingenuity of Earth would merge. Then, the shadows moved. Figures emerged from the dark, predecessors of Varkesh, the high nobles of the old order. They did not come with debate, they came with knives. Kai and Nira watched, helpless, as the betrayal unfolded. They felt Shalira's scream, a sound that tore through the psychic fabric of the memory. They felt the moment her heart turned to stone. They felt her decision, instantaneous and tragic, to lock the throne, to banish the humans, to rule through a grip of iron fear so that she would never ever be hurt like this again. She broke the world to save herself. Kai whispered. She had no choice, Nira said, tears of light streaming down her face. She was alone. But we are not, Kai said. He turned to her. The memories swirled around them, decades of oppression, fleets of war, billions of lives lived in fear. It was a cycle that had ground the galaxy to dust. We can stop it, Kai said. We do not have to seize this power, Nira. We do not have to dominate. Nira looked at him. She saw the mechanic who had jumped into the void to save her. She saw the man who had refused to bow. We transform it, she said. They turned to the massive, blinding core of the throne. They did not try to command it. They did not try to force it to fire weapons or raise shields. Instead, they offered it a new directive. Partnership, they thought, their minds sinking into a single resonant frequency. Not hierarchy, unity. The throne roared. In the physical world, the throne hall was shaking. Varkesh scrambled backward, shielding his eyes. The white crystal tree was groaning, the sound like shifting tectonic plates. "Stop it," Varkesh screamed at the throne. "I command you to stop." The crystal ignored him. It began to liquefy. The massive singular seat of the Empress melted, flowing like mercury. It split, divided, and reformed. Two pillars of light rose from the base. They twisted around each other, a double helix of crystal and energy, rising to form two distinct interlocked stations. They were equal in height, equal in radiance. It was no longer a throne for a ruler. It was a command center for partners. The light cleared. Kai and Nira stood at the center of the helix, their hands still pressed to the interface. Varkesh stared at them with horror. He grabbed his communicator. Fleet command. He shrieked, "Fire! Fire on the capital, burn it all down!" Static answered him. Then, a voice cut through the noise. It was not a human voice. It was the synthetic, godlike resonance of the war AI network. Command rejected. The voice boomed from every speaker in the palace, every ship in orbit, every datapad in the room. The throne is active. The duality is restored. Varkesh looked at his wrist comp. The holographic icons of the fleet had turned from aggressive red to a passive, waiting blue. The ships were powering down their weapons. They were locking their engines. "They are not listening to me," Varkesh whispered. "They never were," Kai said, his voice amplified by the room. They were waiting for the rightful signal. Nira stepped forward. Her eyes were glowing with the residual energy of the machine. The throne was built to ensure balance. Lord Varkesh, it rejects tyranny, and it rejects you. Varkesh pulled a hidden disruptor pistol from his robes. "If I cannot rule," he snarled, raising the weapon. A beam of light struck his hand. It did not come from the throne. It came from the doorway. Empress Exhalira stood there, her own weapon smoking. She walked into the room limping slightly, her royal robes torn and bloodied, but her head high. "That is enough," she said. She looked at Varkesh. She looked at the restructured throne, and then she looked at Kai and Naira. She saw the double helix. She saw the truth of what her empire could have been and what it had become. "Guards," Shalira said calmly. The loyalist palace guard flooded the room, surrounding Varkesh. The Lord Counselor dropped to his knees, clutching his burned hand. "Take him," Shalira said, "and arrest the High Priestess. The coup is over," as Varkesh was dragged away, screaming about purity and bloodlines. Silence descended on the hall. Shalira walked to the base of the new throne. She reached out a trembling hand and touched the crystal. It hummed warmly at her touch, a sound of forgiveness. She turned to Kai and Naira. "You did it," she whispered. "You actually did it." "We had help," Kai said, nodding to the throne. Shalira straightened her spine. She looked at the cameras, the automated drones that were still hovering, broadcasting everything to the Empire. "Is the feed live?" she asked. "It is live." "Majesty," a technician called out from the doorway. "Every screen from here to the outer rim." "Good," Exhalira said. She stepped onto the central dais. She did not look like a conqueror. She looked like a woman who had survived a long, dark winter and was finally seeing the sun. "Citizens of the Empire," she began. Her voice was steady, carrying the weight of her century-long rule. "Today, you were told that your princess was a traitor. You were told that humanity was your enemy. You were told that fear was necessary for survival." She paused, looking directly into the camera lens. "I lied to you." A collective gasp seemed to ripple through the galaxy. "For 50 years, I have ruled from a shadow cast by my own grief. I allowed men like Varkesh to poison our laws and our hearts because I was afraid of the vulnerability that comes with trust. I believed that power had to be solitary to be safe." She turned and extended a hand toward the helix. "My daughter, Princess Nira, and the human Kai Arden have proven me wrong. They have unlocked the true potential of the throne not by force but by unity. They have shown us that the Empire was never meant to be a cage. It was meant to be a bridge." She walked over to Kai. She took his hand, the hand of a mechanic, scarred and stained with soot, and raised it alongside Naira's. "I once cried out in this very hall," Exhalira said, a wry, self-aware smile touching her lips. "Who is that impudent person who wants to be my daughter's lover?" She squeezed Kai's hand, then looked at the camera with a fierceness that dared anyone to challenge her. "Today I answer that question. He is the man who saved us all." The days that followed were a blur of history being written in real time. Nira stood on the balcony of the council chamber, Kai by her side. Below them, the great plaza was filled with millions of citizens. But for the first time in living memory, the crowd was mixed. Humans stood alongside the high-caste Ethel Guardians. There were no riots. There was only a stunned, vibrating anticipation. Nira leaned into the microphone. "The old laws are dissolved," she declared. Her voice echoed across the city. "The xenophobia decrees are struck from the record. The restrictions on human travel and employment are ended effective immediately." She looked at Kai. He nodded, stepping forward to the microphone. The crowd murmured. A human addressing the assembly from the royal balcony was unprecedented. "We are establishing a new council," Kai said. His voice was rougher than Naira's, less polished, but it carried the honesty of the maintenance decks. A council of shared governance. Representatives from every species, every colony, and every caste will have a seat. The throne will no longer dictate, it will listen. It was not an immediate paradise. There were shouts of anger from the conservative blocs. There were cheers from the human sectors. The empire trembled, not with the destruction of war, but with the chaotic, messy vibration of change. 2 weeks later, the trials were swift and public. Lord Varkesh stood in a glass booth, his crimes read out by the very throne AIs he had tried to enslave. The evidence was irrefutable. He was sentenced to life in the penal colonies of the Outer Rim, a poetic justice that Kai had quietly suggested. The priesthood was stripped of its political power. The high priestess was removed. And Sia, the young initiate who had helped them infiltrate the palace, was named the first guardian of the new order, an order dedicated to preserving the history of the throne, not controlling it. But for Kai and Naira, the real challenge was just beginning. They retreated to the Celestial Observatory, a quiet chamber at the pinnacle of the palace's highest spire. It was a room with walls of transparent aluminum, offering a 360-degree view of the cosmos. It was the first time in 14 days they had been alone. No guards, no advisors, no cameras. Naira collapsed onto a cushioned bench, groaning as she kicked off her ceremonial boots. "I think I prefer jailbreaks," she muttered. "Politics is exhausting. Did you see the trade guild representative? He argued with me for 40 minutes about the tariff on grain. 40 minutes. Kai laughed, walking over to a small synthesizer unit in the wall. He punched in a code. "I think you handled him well," Kai said, although threatening to turn him into a toad with your mind powers was a bit of a bluff. He believed it. Naira grinned. "That is what counts." Kai returned with 2 cups of steaming liquid. It wasn't the royal nectar, it was coffee. Synthetic, terrible, colony-style coffee that he had programmed the machine to make. He handed her a cup and sat down beside her. Naira took a sip and grimaced. "This is awful." "It is the taste of freedom," Kai said, taking a long drink. "You will get used to it." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the traffic lanes above. The ships were moving again, but the patterns were different. The rigid militaristic formations were gone, replaced by a chaotic, bustling flow of free trade. "Kai," Naira said softly. "Yeah. Do you think we can actually do this?" Kai looked at her. He saw the doubt in her eyes. The adrenaline of the revolution had faded, leaving behind the terrifying reality of ruling a galaxy. "I do not know," Kai admitted. "Half the nobility still hates me. The other half is afraid of you. We are making this up as we go." Naira set her cup down. She turned to him, tucking her legs up onto the bench. "I feel like a fraud sometimes," she whispered. "I stand there and give these speeches about unity and strength. But inside I am just the girl who was lonely at the banquet table. I am scared that I am not enough for this." Kai set his cup down too. He turned his body toward her. "You are enough," he said. "How do you know?" "Because you chose this," Kai said. "You could have stayed safe. You could have let me die and married Varkesh's nephew and lived a long, boring life. But you chose the hard way. That is what makes you enough." He reached out and took her hand. His thumb traced the bioluminescent markings on her wrist. "And you?" Naira asked. "Are you okay? You are the first human consort in history, and that is a heavy target to paint on your back." "I have spent my whole life being invisible," Kai said, looking at their joined hands. "Being a target is a nice change of pace. At least they see me now." He looked up, meeting her gaze. And as long as you see me, I do not care about the rest. The playfulness in his voice died away, replaced by a raw, naked vulnerability. The distance between them seemed to vanish. Nira reached up, her fingers brushing the hair back from his forehead. She traced the line of his jaw, the small scar on his chin. "I see you," she whispered. "I see all of you." She leaned in. The kiss was slow. It was not the desperate collision of the escape pod, nor the defiant strike of the garden. It was a question and an answer. It was reverent. Kai's arms went around her, pulling her close, not to possess her, but to hold her. He felt the tension leaving her body, the weight of the crown lifting for just a moment. She melted into him, fitting against his chest as if she had been carved from the same stone. They lay back on the cushions, the stars spinning slowly above them. There was a deep, aching hunger in the way they held each other, a need for safety, for a sanctuary where they didn't have to be symbols or saviors. In the quiet of the room, amidst the soft laughter and the whispered promises, the rebellion transformed into something more permanent. It became a home. "I love you," Nira whispered against his skin. "I love you," Kai answered, impudently. Nira laughed, a soft sound that vibrated against his chest. The door chimed softly. They pulled apart, but they did not jump up. They did not hide. They adjusted their clothes with a calm dignity and sat up. "Come in," Nira said. The door slid open. Empress Exalira walked in. She was not wearing her full regalia. She wore a simple robe of white silk, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger, lighter. She stopped when she saw them sitting close together. A flicker of old pain crossed her face, but she pushed it away. "I did not mean to intrude," Exalira said. "You are never an intrusion." "Mother," Nira said. Exalira walked to the window. She looked out at the city. "I used to come up here," she said softly. "With him." Before everything went wrong, she turned to face them. "I see him in you, Kai," she said, "not in your face, but in the way you look at her. It is a terrifying thing to love someone that much. It gives you so much to lose. It gives us something to fight for," Kai said gently. Exalira nodded. "I know that now. I forgot it for a long time." She reached into the pocket of her robe. She pulled out a small object. It was a shard of crystal, glowing with a faint, pulsing light. It was a piece of her own neural crown, the symbol of her absolute authority. She walked over to Nira. "Stand up, my daughter." Nira stood. Exalira reached up and wove the crystal shard into the braid of Nira's hair. It hummed as it connected with Nira's own biosignature. "This is the shard of sovereignty," Exalira said formally. "I recognize you not as my heir, but as my co-ruler. The throne is yours as much as it is mine." Nira's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Mother." Exalira then turned to Kai. He stood up, straightening his tunic. He expected a nod, perhaps a verbal acknowledgement. Instead, Exalira stepped forward and clasped his forearm in the old warrior's grip, hand to elbow, a gesture reserved for comrades who had bled together in battle. Kai was stunned. He gripped her arm back. "You are family," Exalira said, her voice fierce. "You are of my house, and if anyone dares to call you impudent again, they will answer to me." Kai smiled, a genuine crooked grin. "I think I can handle them, Majesty, but I appreciate the backup." Exalira smiled back, a rare, true smile. "I will leave you to your evening," she said. "The dawn comes early. We have a galaxy to rebuild." She turned and swept out of the room, the door sliding shut behind her. Kai and Nira walked to the transparent wall. Below them, the capital city was bathing in the first light of the new sun. The violet clouds were breaking, revealing a sky of brilliant gold. The spaceport was a hive of activity. They saw ships from the human coalition landing beside Ethelgardian cruisers. They saw the trade rings lighting up with colors they had never used before. And in the center of it all, the palace of the Ascendant glowed. The light it cast was not the cold, hard white of the past. It was a warm, shifting blend of violet and gold, reflecting the dual signatures of the two people standing in the tower. Kai wrapped his arm around Naira's waist. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "It is still a mess down there," Kai said, watching a traffic jam form near the southern gate. "It is," Naira agreed. "It is imperfect. It is dangerous. It is chaotic. It is perfect," Kai said. They stood there as the sun rose fully, illuminating a universe that had changed simply because two people had dared to bridge the gap between them. The life lessons they had learned resonated in the silence between them. That love without courage is fragile. That power without empathy is corruption. And that sometimes in a galaxy ruled by fear, the most impudent, rebellious, and necessary act of all is simply daring to believe that you deserve to choose your own heart. Kai kissed the top of her head. "What do we do now, princess?" Nira looked at the horizon, her eyes reflecting the dawn. "Now," she said, "we live